Thanks, Tom. It's such a pleasure to have been able to spend a day here. Fantastic speakers, beautiful ideas. And I do actually have a background in quantum physics. So there's an app I'm going to ask you to download. I know we've had a long day, but I'm actually doing research on how much people actually know about quantum physics. So it's true or false. I'll give you. No, I'm joking. We don't have to do any exams. We don't have to do any quizzes. But I've put up this slide here because I would like to somehow talk about the beautiful parts of science and technology from my perspective, and some view of perhaps the exciting directions that our society is headed in the next few years. And this is a particularly beautiful part of quantum physics. These are all true statements, and I'll refer back to why I've highlighted these in particular. But basically, so to measure something, to understand something, implies an interaction with that system. I think we know that, of course, on a personal level, but in fact, this applies to all objects, all the way through to atoms being probed by lasers. Any kind of understanding of a system implies an interaction with that system. And once you have interacted with a system, you become entangled with that system, and that entanglement will prevail. So that's just and that, of course, is our most accurate theory of reality to date. But I've had the luxury of working in quantum biology and thinking about the origins of life and what kind of environments life can exist in. And I'm not going to put up any more exams or mathematical formulas, but just some pictures, basically, to take you a little bit on a journey of the context, right? We were sitting here today in this place, but where have we come from and where are we going? I think it's important to take stock of both when creating visions for the future. So did you know that, in fact, 10% of your body is as old as the universe itself? This might sound crazy, but theoretical physics has not identified any processes by which hydrogen is produced except the Big Bang itself. We do not observe any other processes whereby hydrogen is produced. Therefore, all of the water molecules in your body contain hydrogen atoms that are 13.8 billion years old. So a curiosity and affinity, a sense of belonging in the universe is most certainly a very fundamental part of who we are. And I'll get to the part about our exploring our place in the universe in a while. But 10% of your body, as far as we can understand, is as old as the universe itself. That's the picture of the cosmic microwave background, that clumpiness of those early hydrogen atoms that were produced in the Big Bang, as far as we know, theoretically. This is a picture that's exciting from a South African perspective. I don't know if you've heard of the Square Kilometre Array radio telescope. But this will be the largest data generator on the planet. It's an 11-nation partnership. South Africa won the bid to build most of the telescopes, some 1,000 dishes in a remote part of South Africa, the Northern Cape, in collaboration with the location in Australia, as well as 8 other African partner states that will host single dishes. So as you can hear, it's a distributed telescope. The idea is to kind of patch the observations by each of these dishes together to create a 50 times more highly resolved capability looking into the radio frequencies than ever before. This whole radio telescope, when it's finished in about 10 years, will generate more data than humanity's ever generated in a single project. That's 160 terabytes per second. If you're wondering now how that is going to work, well, that's the fun part about science. We don't know, but we have 10 years to figure it out. So this is a test phase image, the most highly resolved ever image of the center of our Milky Way galaxy. So what you're looking at there are supernova remnants, and the rest of the periodic table, it took some few 100 million years for these kind of systems to form stars. Then there goes supernova and then create the rest of the periodic table. So a long way back that the first supernovas occurred. And with science, of course, we're able to now look at these things more highly resolved than ever before. And that's where the rest of our stuff came from, these supernova events. And if we think about the previous largest data generator on Earth, that was the particle collider. And in fact, the internet was envisaged, not commercialized or sort of invented, but envisaged by researchers working at CERN, the particle collider, wondering how on earth they would analyze the vast amount of data that was going to come out of these particle collision events, and that they would need to distribute data, remotely analyze it, and then send it back. So that was kind of the beginnings of what we now, I think, are quite familiar with, the internet. So we are extremely excited to see what kind of new imaginations are going to come out of this experiment. But let's come a bit closer to home. Our star is a relative newcomer in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way has some of the oldest stars in the universe at around 13.5 billion years old, so quite an old, perhaps culturally, neck of the woods here in the Milky Way galaxy, but our star just 4.6 billion years old. And in fact, our oceans, obviously a major characteristic of our planet. It's the only planet we know of in the solar system where liquid water is supported at the surface, and that, of course, gives us the characteristic blue color. But when we look at the isotope ratios of the water molecules in our oceans, we find that some other body radiated on these oceans that must have predated the sun, because the sun's total lifetime output of radiation is not enough to have caused the deuteration that we see in our oceans. So our oceans actually come from somewhere else. They've also got a story to tell. And of course, water being such a crucial part of our bodies and our daily activities, all living systems that we know of on Earth, in fact, very important molecule. And the more you investigate, the more questions arise, really, like where did the water come from? But certainly that's an important aspect of life on Earth. So I have not solved the problem of what life is or where it came from. That's a big question, and we may never fully understand. But that are at least some images and some ideas in terms of how we've arrived here, what we rely on in terms of resources, the sun, obviously for energy, water obviously being a crucial one, food that then emerges through the photosynthetic process, which combines the sunlight and the water. So we're on a very beautiful planet Earth, and I think you keep seeing that picture of Mars. And let me just emphasize now that Earth is a unique planet in the solar system. It hosts liquid water on the surface, and we can even see life from space. The jungle areas, for example, in Central Africa or South America, can be seen from space. There is no other planet even vaguely similar to Earth in the solar system. And it is most certainly not as some kind of plan B or escape plan that I'm talking about exploring, because it's quite obvious, whether you're on the surface of the planet or looking at it from space, that this is a beautiful place to be. So let me emphasize that before I talk a bit about where, in my mind, we are going. So humans are explorers. I think it's only been a really recent phenomenon where we've mostly understood the surface of the planet we live on. Exploring nowadays is like TripAdvisor or going on Google Earth to see exactly what the entrance to your hotel looks like. And this is somehow going on an adventure, to a new place, which is great. Of course, I love traveling. But this is a unique point in history, because all of the 200,000 years that humans have been around we have been driven by a curiosity and a sense of discovering things that are behind the mountain range, over the horizon. And we're now at this sort of point where true exploration is no longer possible because we've explored most of the surface. I mean, my ancestors, for example, arrived in Cape Town in 1688. The Marais family as French Huguenot sort of refugees escaping persecution in France. This was a several-month journey into the complete unknown, to what was then the very newly formed Dutch colony at the tip of Africa, and subsistence sort of farming and contributing to agriculture, and the wine industry was a part of the role that my ancestors played in South Africa. So things have changed, although we have continued to explore, and it goes without saying, this is the 50th anniversary of the first time that humans have stepped on the moon. But is this a celebration, or is this a call to rapid action? Because for those of us who weren't around in the 60s and 70s to witness what, in my opinion, was the grandest, in terms of imagining what could be possible through technology and then seeing it being achieved, this was one of the proudest moments for our species, I believe. And the inspirational power of this event, documented in the spike in students enrolling in STEM PhDs in the US, was directly attributed to having witnessed this event and having lived through this era. So for those of us who weren't around, did we miss it? Were we born like 30 years too late? Are we just going to optimize and make things more efficient and sort of slowly degrade our environment until there's no options left? Or are we going to continue to make leaps like this out of the current way of doing things and way of thinking into a new, more advanced way of understanding and operating in our reality? So on that note, I think this is an event and another 50th anniversary that's coming up that perhaps people don't talk about as much as the moon landing. But in fact, we've had the capability to land things on Mars since 1976. And I think we still have time before the 50th anniversary of the first landing of technology on Mars to perhaps make that a cause for celebration and not some kind of nostalgia with which we've really celebrated the 50th anniversary of the moon landing this year. So back in 2013, my whole world froze when I saw this article, a call for volunteers for a Martian settlement, in the newspaper. And me and 200,000 other people around the world applied, and over a period of some years, after online exams and so on, 100 candidates were shortlisted. I am one of them. And the Mars One project has never been without financial problems. And if you Google it now, you can read about those in detail. So I would say the major successes of this project have been that Sheldon Cooper volunteered to go to Mars with the Mars One project, a direct citation there, on the Big Bang Theory. We had Cartman volunteering to go to Mars with the Mars One project on South Park. And we had Lisa Simpson volunteering to go to Mars on The Simpsons. So like these are three of my all-time favorite TV shows. And in that sense, the Mars One project, while they have not been successful at raising any money yet, so we're not holding our breath any longer because the 100 were announced back in 2015. There's been no progress in terms of investment. However, the conversation has been started. People are thinking about it. People are watching these in popular culture, that this is now on our horizon. It's within our sphere of capability. Moreover, I believe it will happen in our lifetimes. But you know, there are a lot of challenges besides just securing an investor who believes in the project. There are technological challenges, of course, Mars being 200 million kilometers away. We've all seen it at night, so whether you've known it or not, that star that doesn't twinkle, it's orange, that's probably Mars. Apps like Skyview can help you find it. So 200 million kilometers away means that even a WhatsApp message would take 10 minutes to travel between the two planets. And that's at the speed of light. That's not a telco failure. That's just the speed of light. So it's pretty far away. And living on the surface is rather challenging. The temperature is perhaps not the most challenging part. We know there are parts of Earth where populations live through winters that can get as low as -60. The atmospheric composition and pressure are amongst the biggest challenges. So even if you were able to, even if there were oxygen in the atmosphere, which there is not, the pressure is so low that you wouldn't be able to breathe at that pressure. The gravity is probably the funnest part in terms of construction, in terms of sport, in terms of kung fu, flying kicks. I mean, in terms of golf, I don't know, lots of fun stuff with 38% gravity. But the harsh reality is that to be outside, you would, of course, have to wear a helmet to enable you to breathe and deal with that kind of pressure. So we've talked a bit about, the history of everything. Like here we are on Earth, where we come from. We've got some indications of that scientifically and otherwise. Yes, we need a vision for the future, and I think I've given an indication of where that vision is, and Mars is really just a stepping stone for understanding and exploring the rest of the solar system. It's the only planet that we're kind of capable of thinking about actually building a base on right now. I mean, the moon is really part of Earth's system, so I'd say we should have done that a long time ago. Mars is a stepping stone to go further, but yes, we can all talk about a vision. Yes, we can talk about lessons that we've learned from the past. But what are the practical steps that we are making towards achieving our goals? And I think we've all faced challenges like this where, devising the very next step can be the most challenging part about working towards some grand goal. So as a South African, without, if I had $10 billion, I could probably commission a Starship launch with SpaceX for some time late in the 2020s. We're hoping that the Starship technology would be ready by the late 2020s to transport people and equipment to Mars. In 2022, SpaceX announced they will be attempting to land the Starship on the moon. So that would be the date to watch out for. But $10 billion is a lot, so what contribution can I make? And partly inspired by watching this on YouTube, some of the original footage of the Shackleton expedition of 1914 is available in this documentary. And this is a most remarkable feat of human resilience and determination and leadership, really, because this was the advert, and I think you can see striking parallels between the call for volunteers for Mars and the call for volunteers for this is the grand era of Antarctic exploration. Besides, of course, the gender bias, we know women are far better suited to space exploration because they're more intelligent. That's hard to prove, but women certainly on average are smaller and therefore eat less, drink less, and breathe less. So you would certainly want a diverse team of 50% each gender, as well as a diversity of backgrounds, whether that's professional, cultural, etc., because we know that teams facing challenges that nobody has thought about before, diversity is a great way to enable these kind of teams to solve challenges. But I think the rest are striking parallels between this journey of 1914 and the call for volunteers for the Mars One project, which came out 100 years later. So it's, I think in this modern era, we often seek comfort instead of knowledge. And I think if we need to remind ourselves what we're capable of, This ship of Shackleton's got stuck in the ice before it reached the continent, cracked. They had to evacuate from the boat, knowing that the ocean would melt come summer, and they would somehow have to make their way back without any communication systems whatsoever. Nobody knew where they were. Not a single life was lost, but I'll leave the rest for you to watch in the documentary. So thinking about that, in May this year, I very happily quit my corporate job and established Proudly Human as a kind of movement, which will do several initiatives, including this one of 2021 to Antarctica. So where I live in Cape Town, I can almost see the boat that takes researchers, South African researchers, down to the South African base. So this was part of the inspiration for the idea, as well as the parallels in the environmental conditions between Mars and Antarctica. So the temperature, not so different, sitting at around -40 in winter for Antarctica, and around -50, -60 on average for Mars. And the isolation is another striking parallel, because even the space station is not really a good analog for a Mars trip, because it's like a 3-day evacuation process from the space station, which of course would not be possible from Mars. And during the winter in Antarctica is not possible either. There's a 4-month period where no boat and no plane can access the team that would be there. This has of course been done many times. Maybe you know people who've spent the winter in Antarctica. Teams of around 10 typically hold down the fort at national bases. Where we will go is in fact a private camp, White Desert. And during 3 months in summer, you can visit there for $37,000 per person, including your flights from Cape Town. If you go in winter, it turns out there's no one there. So if you speak very nicely to the CEO, which we have done, you can arrange an agreement whereby our team of 10 will overwinter in this facility, which is typically empty during winter. You can check out their website. So we'll be, of course, dealing with temperatures that are below what we may be used to, even in London, and maximum wind speeds, which are astounding, like over 300 kilometers per hour. So this means we'll be using wind power as a primary resource when there's sunlight, solar as well. Hydrogen fuel cells with abundant water is also an idea we are thinking towards. Water is, of course, abundant, but wastewater management systems are not frequently used in Antarctica. Some bases, like the Belgian Princess Elizabeth base and the Australian base, do have wastewater systems that can treat a lot of water, but typically the wastewater would be shipped back, burning diesel, obviously, to the point of origin of the team. Even in this day and age, yes, because of the Antarctic Treaty, which was strict in terms of what water you can re-release into the environment. So this is the part of our trade exchange where we will set up something where they don't need to ship all of the sewage back to Cape Town. Food we'll attempt to grow. So this is a project that we have in mind. This is sitting outside the German base in Antarctica, a collaboration with Airbus and DLR, and inside we will grow food, as you see there. And this is also, the future of food. I hope you can see parallels now between setting up camp in a harsh environment, whether we're thinking about a refugee camp or a group of people displaced because of climate change, a moon base, a Mars base. Some things don't change, and that's the requirement for energy, and you use whatever resources you have. The requirement for clean water, processing wastewater is a part of that, which we've not really fully adopted into our city lives enough on Earth. And food, of course, production, which we would optimize using machine learning in terms of lighting conditions. Can we grow kelp as supplements for diet, because these things can grow with low light and low temperature. So those are some of the things we're thinking about. That's what we hope doesn't happen to our antennas for communication, because as well as our ground control teams monitoring our sort of IoT systems and overview of our devices, we'll also be sending back footage, terabytes every day, because we'll be filming a documentary on the whole process. Around a 9 to 10 month stay that we'll be there, we'll film most of the things that go on there. So 3D printing, whether you're in Antarctica or in any city on Earth or on Mars, this is really a technology that's difficult to imagine being sustainable without. So being able to take resources in situ, so from the situation where you are, and be able to create and manufacture spare parts, broken parts, expanded habitats, etc. Lots of exciting developments happening in this field, without which it's difficult to imagine how we would successfully live on the moon or on Mars or beyond. So we don't plan to end with the Antarctic expedition, but we will then go to plus 60, perhaps the Lut Desert in Iran, the hottest place on Earth, then live in a submarine, and then be prepared through the technology and research that we have been developing through the years to be able to consult on not building satellites and not building rockets. Plenty of companies are in that space, but really talking about the community living, the interface between the people and the technology, and what kind of technologies can function in different types of environments. So I hope I haven't gone over time, but this is a nice video I hope to end with in terms of thinking about well, let's just see this quote. Thinking about people saying that things are impossible, and this was an unfortunate statement made by a chief engineer of a major launch provider just a few months before SpaceX managed to re-land the boosters. Now we've got Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos' company, also re-landing boosters, and reusability is now a word that we associate with the rocket technology, which didn't exist before this successful event. So this is the Falcon Heavy, the first ever launch of the Falcon Heavy. It was successful. For a rocket launch to succeed in the first attempt successfully is already a great achievement. You're going to see in a minute what was inside the Falcon Heavy, which was launched beyond Mars. So mission complete in terms of demonstrating launch capability beyond Mars. So SpaceX was established back in 2003, and now the US is considering launching crew from the US again for the first time in a decade because of partnership with SpaceX on the Crew Dragon capsule. And the reusability is basically going to reduce cost of launch by more than 50%. So whether you're a developing country wanting to launch CubeSats or whether you're planning to get to Mars, this has been a necessary part of the puzzle in terms of making it affordable and feasible to geospace industry at all. So you'll see in a second what was launched into space. There the boosters are detaching to be retrieved back down onto Earth. And that's Elon Musk's car. That's not Elon Musk, obviously, but his car basically just completed its first orbit around the sun. It will be floating around in orbit around the sun in all perpetuity. And this is the song that was actually playing in the car until the batteries went flat. There's also a copy of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy inside the car. So they come back down the boosters. This was said to be impossible, but will now save up to 50% of cost of launch. So I hope that besides sharing my vision of my future, which I hope will end on another planet, and I think that planet is our next door neighbor planet Mars for now, anyway, before we develop capability to go further. Perhaps some of you will volunteer for the Antarctic trip. Maybe I'll see some of you on Mars, but maybe not. I'm sure each of you has got your own dreams and visions for the future, some of which I've had the chance to hear about today. But the point of my talk really, I think, and I love the opportunities I have to go speak to children, which is basically to remind people to nurture their dreams, to remember their dreams, to follow their dreams, and to take practical steps towards achieving them. Because this particular dream of mine, this is me at age 14 on the right, and as my mom has said, my talk hasn't changed at all because I was still talking about power, air, water, food, city life. Some things don't change, whether we're 100 years in the future or living on a different planet, and that's the basic requirement for resources for humans. I think community spirit is then another addition to that. We can't just survive, we need to thrive. So that's the kind of research we hope to do at Proudly Human. And I don't know if you photoshopped yourself into Elon's car or what your vision of the future is, but for sure, one thing I do know is that we need each and every single one of us to really believe in our dreams, really make a concerted effort to work towards those dreams and to collaborate, because only through collaboration can we really honestly work towards a proudly human future, whatever planet we're on. Thank you very much.